So my dad transferred to UAB. We got him a room in the NICU, the neuro unit. And one thing I remember is it was July, and that waiting room was cold. I mean cold. Like 58 degrees, people in full jackets, cold. And you can only have 2 visitors at a time, and they took that rule pretty serious. Because you got a bunch of people in there with their heads busted open and neuro issues. That's important. And my uncle's in the waiting room just screaming his head off about how he's so brokenhearted about his brother. He never could cry quietly. He never does anything quietly. And he's making waves, complaining about every decision me and my sister have made, even though literally the choice we made is what saved his life. Because if we'd chosen intubation, he would have died. And the doctor comes up, it's a resident physician, and he had an accent. He was from Austria. And he starts talking, and my uncle immediately interrupts him. Are you German? He's trying to explain my dad's surgery he's about to have that he may not live through. And my uncle wants to ask him about his accent. I couldn't believe it. And he wouldn't shut up until I said, well, yeah, that's great. We've established that his accent is funny. Now let's hear about the damn surgery that my dad's got to go through. And my uncle didn't like being silenced. And the other thing was, he had grand designs on getting a hotel room with my grandmother. But my grandmother at the time, and even years after, she relied on helpers at night, sitters and other stuff. So she had and my cousin too, so she had an elaborate system. And when they found out the hotel was going to be $300 a night, because this is downtown Birmingham, they're like, oh, well, we'll just go back home. And my uncle comes back while me and my sister are back with my dad, of course breaking the rule, because the rules don't apply to people. They don't apply to him because he loves his brother. And my dad keeps going in and out because he's brain damaged, so he doesn't know what's going on. And every time he wakes up, my uncle's just screaming at him, I love you, I love you, I love you. And my dad's just like, okay, great, fine. And my uncle's still putting on a show. And he turns to us and says, well, y'all need to keep saying that, because it may not mean anything to him, but it means something to me. And we just about fell out. Oh, because that's what's so important, is your feelings and what's going on with you. Everything has to be about you. What you want to do is so important. And then he's like, oh, are y'all going to spend the night? I said, no. He has surgery in the morning. We'll be here first thing before surgery. No, one of you needs to spend the night. No, he wouldn't want it that way. I knew my dad. I still know my dad. I know my dad better than my uncle thinks he did. I know my dad well. He wouldn't want anybody spending the night, wasting time, just wearing yourself out. Because you're not going to get much sleep at the hospital. Go home, get a good night's sleep, and come back. That's how I feel too. I don't want anybody spending the night with me. But my uncle's like, no, I know better than y'all do, because somebody needs to stay, and I kept disagreeing. And another thing about us is we were both in our 20s at the time, but everyone just still treated us like we were little kids. And I didn't really understand it. When reality, I was a grown man. I was 25. My sister was even older. And we didn't know better. Now, it's just my uncle. Other people did stuff, and he goes back to the waiting room, and my sister goes back too, and I come back, and my sister's pissed. She's laid back. She doesn't get mad easily, and she just gets pissed at my uncle and finally just has enough of his bullshit. And my uncle, every time you call him on something, he acts like you're the bad guy. So in this case, He quit talking about it, but he loudly talked about how he wasn't supposed to talk about it. And he finally leaves. Thank God. It was just torture. Because there are people in there, in the waiting room too, that their relatives are in the NICU. And it's serious. Brain damage, the brain controls everything. So damage to that's damage to your whole body. And they're quietly not making noise. I'm amazed he didn't get thrown out. I wish we could have thrown him out. So the next morning, my uncle's going to bring my grandmother down, and I think my grandmother's brother was going to come too for whatever, because we needed another warm body to tell us how we were doing stuff wrong. And my uncle gets up, and he just doesn't feel up to driving. He doesn't feel up to it. He can't do it. So he sits in the driveway and cries. And I know what you're thinking. Oh, he just felt so bad for his brother. Yeah, you've heard all the bullshit he pulled. Don't you start feeling sorry for him. So he has to call my cousin, who has a kid. Like, her daughter was like 4 at the time. And she agrees to drive him and take him down there. Because my uncle also wanted to go to the VA, because he's a veteran, and have something looked at of his. This will become important later. And they get there close to the hospital. My uncle gets out of the moving car in the middle of traffic to get into the hospital. Doesn't wait to park. No, that's too good for him. He's got to get out in the middle of traffic. Have you seen a pattern here of nothing he can do quietly without just attracting as much attention as possible? And the surgery was early in the morning. I don't even think the sun was up, and I didn't get much sleep. And as I remember, one of my dad's friends came too, and he woke me up. The surgery went well. They got a shunt put in. They fixed the bleed. It was great. The doctor was an asshole and about the most arrogant person I've ever met, but apparently that's just how doctors are. If you have a doctor that's humble, you don't want him cutting you open. I learned that. And he gets that done. So my dad's out of the woods, and we actually he got done with surgery, and it was really important that my grandmother get something to eat, so they left. And this is kind of immature of us, but we had every right. We moved floors, and we didn't tell them, because we just wanted to be away from my uncle. And they caught on really quickly, which was a disappointment. Like, man, we wish we could have worked that out. So the surgery's done. So my uncle has eaten lunch, and my cousin's like, hey, go to the doctor now, and that way I can give you a ride back when we get done, because I got to get back home. And Mom's like, no, I got to sit here with my brother and scream throughout the waiting area just so I can make waves, because it's really important that everybody see how much I love my brother. And I know you probably don't understand. Even my dad thinks so now. He said, I didn't know he cared. I thought he was largely indifferent to me, because he used to call me Little Jesus when we were kids. Because my dad was a good kid. My uncle was the ne'er-do-well. So the surgery goes well. And finally, after my cousin leaves, my uncle goes to the VA hospital. And they don't decide to take him. And guess what? He disappeared. Nobody knew where he was. And guess whose problem it became? It became ours. I was like, I am not going to look for him. I refused. I said, if he's that stupid to do this, I'm not going to look for him. He's just lost. Because we didn't learn about this until the next day. Nobody could find him. He sat on the curve, and he ended up getting a taxi and paid a ridiculous amount of money to take it home. He even paid somebody $20 to let him use his phone. But after that, my uncle was out of the way. It was great. We had a good system going. We had everything going well. I'll stop this one and do another